Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are strapping in for a really high-fidelity look at a machine that's so much more than just a stomp box.
Yeah, it really is.
I mean, your sources are calling it an evolved instrument, which is a pretty bold claim. We're diving deep into the Roland RE202 Space Echo.
The 2022 release, yeah, this is the big one, the flagship in their multi-switch series.
And it feels like the engineering challenge here was just immense.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, think about what they were trying to do. They weren't just making a delay pedal. They were trying to recreate the very specific, very complex magic of the original 1974 Roland RE201.
Which was a physical, mechanical thing.
Exactly, an electromechanical device. Its sound came from, physical stuff, the friction of the tape running over the heads, the heat from the motor, the weird things that happen as components get old.
And those little flaws, those imperfections, that's what became the sound, right? That's what people loved.
That's the whole ballgame. The original RE201 was never pristine. It was warm, it was thick, and it was unstable, but in this really beautiful musical way.
So the mission for the RE202 wasn't just to copy the sound of the Echoes.
No, not at all. It was to model and then perfect, and then actually expand on those very flaws.
Yeah.
The degradation, the tape saturation, the wow and flutter, all of it, but for a modern musician.
And looking through the sources, I mean, it seems like they didn't just meet that challenge, they kind of blew right past it.
They really did.
That description, evolved instrument, it feels right because this isn't just emulation anymore. It's like they took everything they've learned over decades and poured it into this ultra high-res modern processor.
Right. So just to be clear for you, the listener, about what this thing actually is, it's a really sophisticated processor that's doing several things at once.
Yeah.
It's a multi-head tape echo, it's a spring reverb, and it's a preamp emulator. And crucially, it's all running in true stereo.
And the core claim, the one we're really going to test as we go through this, is that this is the most advanced, most detailed, most feature-complete digital version of an RE201 ever made.
Period.
And when you look at the features, it's all about utility, isn't it? It's not just nostalgia. It gives you that perfectly modeled tape sound, but then it adds things the original could only dream of.
Like what?
Well, the delay times are way longer. It's true stereo, which is huge. The modulation controls are way more advanced, and this is critical. They completely rebuilt that classic Space Echo preamp system, which, as we'll get into, is like half the tone.
And you can't overlook the modern stuff, the things you just need now. Preset storage is a big one.
Of course.
And having 3 different reverb modes, not just the original spring. These are things studio users and live performers just expect now. It wasn't possible back then.
So the big takeaway, the aha moment right at the start, is that this thing is the ultimate evolution of that legacy. They had the original blueprints, they measured actual analog units.
Right. And that's the key. They didn't just listen to the old ones. They mathematically reverse engineered the physics of how the machine actually behaved.
That's the distinction, isn't it? Modeling the physics, not just the sound that comes out at the end.
Exactly.
And that's where this deep dive gets really technical and where all the incredible detail is. So let's get into the anatomy of this emulation, because that's really the foundation of why it sounds the way it does.
Okay, so let's pop the hood on this thing. The reason the RE202 sounds so authentic is all down to its DSP engine. It's described as an ultra-high-resolution engine.
Right.
And that's not just marketing speak. It's critical. It's not just running a simple delay algorithm where the repeats fade out. It's running a constant physics simulation of all these electromechanical parts interacting.
Okay, so when we say ultra-high resolution, what does that actually mean for the sound we hear? How is it different from, say, the older RE20 pedal, which was also really good?
It means the chip has enough processing power, enough headroom to model all these different interactions and nonlinear behaviors at the same time.
Non-linearities.
Yeah.
You mean the unpredictable stuff.
The unpredictable but musical stuff, yeah. And the key concept here is independent modeling. Simpler digital emulations might just try to model the final audio output, maybe with a few filters. The RE202 models all the system components separately and then lets them interact dynamically, just like they would in the real world.
Okay, so let's drill down on that. What are these components that are being modeled independently? What does that actually do to the sound?
Well, they modeled every single physical part that makes a sound. So first you've got the 4 heads, there's the 1 record head, and the 3 separate playback heads.
And they're all modeled as individual things.
All modeled separately. Yeah. And the sonic implication of that is huge. In a real Vintig unit, each one of those playback heads would color the sound a tiny bit differently, depending on its physical alignment or wear and tear.
I see.
By modeling them independently, the RE202 can perfectly simulate those subtle phase issues and the stereo imaging that you get from the physical spacing of the heads. You just can't get that complexity if you model them all as one block.
So you're not just getting 3 delays, you're getting 3 distinct, slightly imperfect virtual playback systems all running at once.
Precisely. And then they modeled the mechanical tape transport itself.
The actual movement of the tape.
Yeah, the physics of it, the wobble, the friction, the tiny variations in speed. That's what feeds into the wow and flutter modulation, which we'll get to, but it means when you turn the repeat rate knob, you're not just changing the delay time.
You're hearing all the other stuff that goes along with changing the tape speed.
The dynamic shifts, the subtle pitch bending, just like the real thing.
That sounds like a massive amount of processing power is needed for that.
It is. A ton.
Yeah.
And beyond the mechanics, they had to model the tape itself, how it saturates, how it responds to bias.
Tape saturation is that compression, that warmth, right?
Right. It's that glue that makes everything sound thick and cohesive. But the bias behavior is really interesting.
Okay, explain bias. You hear that term a lot with analog gear, but what does it mean for the sound of the RE202?
So tape bias was this high-frequency signal they applied during recording to get the tape to work better, basically. Better high-end, less distortion. But if the bias was a little bit off or the tape was getting old,
you'd get a different sound.
You'd get this really specific type of nonlinear compression and a darker, less predictable sound. The RE202 models that. It makes sure that the signal being recorded onto the virtual tape already has that vintage magnetic character baked in.
Wow. And then you add in the head spacing for the rhythms and the other stuff.
The spring reverb tank, which is a nightmare to model because it's so chaotic, and that vintage preamp path.
We have to talk about the preamp.
We do. But the main point here is that this level of detail, this completeness, makes it the most comprehensive model of an RE201 ever done in hardware. It's an interactive system simulator. It's not just an audio effect.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for me. The preamp. So many players who used the original RE201 say they bought the thing just for the input stage.
Oh, 100%.
They'd run their guitar or synth through it with the echo turned all the way down just for the tone it added.
It's totally true. That RE201 had this very distinct transistor preamp that added a ton of color. People used it as a dirty boost, a tone shaper.
Yeah.
If the RE202 didn't get that part right, the whole thing would sound sterile, no matter how good the delay modeling was.
And the sources break down exactly what that emulation captures. They talk about harmonic sweetening, subtle grit, and that tape compression. When they say sweetening, are we talking about adding those subtle upper harmonics that make it sound more alive?
Yes, that's exactly it. It's the soft clipping you get from that specific vintage transistor design. It adds warmth, it adds thickness, a kind of richness to the original tone.
So you get this feeling of it being louder, or at least denser, even before any echo starts.
Right. It's modeling a really desirable kind of distortion that just gives the signal weight and presence.
So the preamp is the bedrock. It's the secret sauce that makes sure your dry sound and your echo repeats all sound like they belong together, like they have this analog weight.
Absolutely. Without that colored signal hitting the virtual tape heads, the repeats would just sound thin and tacked on.
And that's really one of the things that sets this apart then. It's not just an echo pedal, it's a full-on tone conditioner, just like the original was for studio guys and guitarists back in the day.
Yep.
Okay, so let's move on to the modern necessities, because the tone is vintage, but this thing is built for today. Let's talk about connectivity and control.
The first thing, and it's a massive upgrade, is true stereo input and output.
The original was mono.
The original was mono, yeah.
Yeah.
So right away, this becomes a pro-level tool for synth players, keyboardists, studio engineers using it on an OSEN.
And guitarists with stereo rigs.
Of course. Having true stereo is just non-negotiable for high-end effects now.
And the pro control options are pretty deep. Full MIDI in and out. Now, for someone who's maybe new to this level of gear, why is MIDI so important when you've got all the knobs right there on the front?
MIDI just opens up a whole other level of control. So you've got 4 presets you can get to with the foot switches, which is great for playing live.
C'est essential.
But MIDI expands that to 127 presets. So imagine you dial in this really complex rhythmic sound with a specific tape age and saturation. That takes time. MIDI recall makes that setting totally instant. It's crucial for a complex live show or a studio session where you need to pull up specific delay sounds for different songs.
And you've also got USB for updates and an external jack for a foot switch or an expression pedal.
Right, so you can control things like the delay time or the feedback with your foot in real time. But there's one other feature here that really screams Pro Studio gear,
What's that?
the Kill Dry option. This is the feature that proves it's not just a fancy pedal, it's a high-end processor.
Okay, explain that use case for someone who maybe hasn't worked in a studio. Why do you need to kill the dry signal?
So when you're using an effect on a mixing board, like a delay, you usually put it on what's called an auxiliary send. This means your dry guitar signal stays on its own channel, and you send a copy of it to the delay unit. The echo sound then comes back on a separate channel.
So you can mix them together.
Exactly. The Kill Dry function lets you tell the RE202 to only output the wet signal, the echoes. If you didn't have that, you'd have your main dry signal from the board, plus another dry signal coming from the pedal.
And they'd be slightly out of phase, right?
And it would sound thin and muddy, a classic phase problem. Kill Dry gives you that perfect, clean separation you need for professional parallel processing.
That one little detail really does separate it from the pack. It's a true studio workhorse. All right, so we get the technical foundation now. We understand the simulated tape, the heads, the preamp. Let's talk about the controls, how you actually sculpt this sound. We can start with the traditional tape echo controls.
Okay, so the main delay controls are, conceptually simple, but they're really deep because they're mimicking a physical machine.
Right.
Take repeat rate.
Right.
That's just your delay time, but it's framed as virtual tape speed. So when you slow the tape down, the delay time gets longer and vice versa. But the crucial thing is, as you turn that knob, it affects the pitch of the repeats.
It bends them, just like real tape.
Just like real tape. It's really smooth and musical.
And then you've got intensity, which is feedback. If repeat rate is time, I guess intensity is density.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah, and this is where it becomes a dream for ambient players. Intensity is the regeneration, how many times the echo repeats before it fades away, and when you crank it.
It goes into self-oscillation.
Yes, and the sources are really clear on this. It self-oscillates beautifully. It's not that harsh digital clipping you get from some pedals. It's this rich, dark, really controllable feedback that you can play with.
Then you've got the basic tone shaping. Echo volume, and then bass and treble.
Right, and those EQs only affect the repeats, which is important. It lets you tuck the echoes behind your dry signal by, say, rolling off the highs so they get darker with each repeat.
But the real magic, the real analog texture, comes from the other two knobs, right? The modulation and saturation controls.
Exactly. These are separate from the main delay controls. You have a dedicated knob for wow and flutter.
So for anyone listening, that's the classic imperfection of tape. That sort of wobble. The slow pitch variation is wow, and the faster jittery variation is flutter.
And that's what makes tape feel so organic and three-dimensional. The RE202 gives you a dedicated knob to control how much of that you want, and right next to it is the saturation knob.
Which is tied directly to that preamp and tape model we talked about.
Yep. You can use it to intentionally push the input and the virtual tape into this sweet harmonic overdrive. You can go from just a little bit of warming to some pretty significant grit, all while keeping the echoes clear. These two knobs are where you dial in the real analog character.
Okay, so moving beyond the basic timing, the absolute heart of the Space Echo sound has always been its rhythmic side. And that's all about the mode selector.
Right. The original RE201 had these multiple playback heads set at different distances along the tape. And by choosing different combinations of those heads, you could create these really cool rhythmic patterns.
And the RE2A2 gives you 14 different combinations.
14 modes, yeah. It's a lot.
So how does that translate into actual rhythms? What do the different combo singles, duals, triples actually sound like?
Well, let's say you set the tape speed to a basic quarter note. If you select a mode that uses head 1 and 2, you might get a dotted eighth note repeat alongside that quarter note repeat.
Ah, that classic U2 syncopated sound.
Exactly. Or if you select a mode with all three heads at once, you might get a dense, cascading triplet feel. And because the virtual heads are at fixed distances, the time relationship between them is always musically related. It's not random.
So that's the difference between this and just a regular delay pedal with a tap tempo. The rhythms are baked into the geometry of the machine.
That's a perfect way to put it. That's what makes it such a rhythmic instrument in itself, perfect for post-rock, dub, psychedelic stuff. You can create these complex interlocking patterns just by switching modes.
It's incredible. And that leads us to what a lot of the sources call the real game changer on this unit, the tape age modeling.
This is huge.
It's like having 3 different Space Echoes in one box, one that's brand new, one that's been used a bit, and one that's basically falling apart. You just press a button to switch between them. Let's break down those 3 modes: new, aged, and worn.
So you start with the new setting. This is the sound of a perfectly maintained machine with a fresh reel of tape.
Clean.
Super clean. Stable, clear, smooth, very little extra coloration or noise. This is your high fidelity foundation. It's great for modern ambient stuff where you want that tape feel, but you still need a lot of clarity.
Okay, then you switch to aged. This is where the character starts to creep in.
Yeah, this model's medium wear and tear. The tone gets darker, you get more high-frequency roll-off, so the repeats get muddy a little faster.
And the modulation gets deeper.
Yep, the wow and flutter gets a bit more pronounced, and you start to hear a little bit of tape hiss in the background.
Yeah.
That's that classic sound of a machine that's been on the road for a few years. Warm, colored, definitely vintage.
And finally, you have worn tape. This is for when you want maximum character. This is the lo-fi setting.
This is total instability. The sources call it unstable, heavily saturated, noisy, and gritty. But, and this is so important, they say it's all done in a musical way.
I love that.
It means you get the most extreme pitch drift, the most compression and saturation, and a really dark, filtered sound. This is the setting for lo-fi textures, for those deep, unpredictable, warped repeats that sound like the machine is on its last legs.
It's amazing that they could model the noise and instability so well that they could actually engineer it to be musical. It's not just random static, it's tape noise.
That intentionality is everything. The ability to just switch between these three personalities on the fly is what gives you the sonic fingerprint of decades of use.
And the tape echo is the main event, but we can't forget the reverb. That's also been massively expanded and turns this into a full-on atmosphere machine.
Right, so the foundation is still there. The iconic RE201 spring reverb.
That splashy, almost metallic sound.
Yeah, the chaotic decay that blooms right after the note.
Yeah.
But they added two new options that are really important for modern production.
Okay, what are they and how do they change what you can do with it?
The new additions are plate and hall. A plate reverb gives you that smooth, dense sound from a vintage 70s recording studio. It's a much more musical and less boingy decay than the spring.
Right.
And then the hall reverb is just a huge ambient spatial wash. Think of Cathedral. It's that ethereal long-tail reverb you need for cinematic sound design.
So as the sources say, you can blend these new reverbs with the tape echo to create massive atmospheric depth.
Yeah, it really takes it from being just a delay pedal to being a complete environment builder.
Okay, so as we move into how people actually use this thing, the RE202 really stands out because of its real-time expressive controls. These are features that were just not possible on the original machine.
Not in a controllable way, at least.
Let's start with the basics for performance. It has tap tempo, obviously, so you can sync the delay time to the music. And it has a hold mode.
Yeah, the hold mode lets you do sound-on-sound looping and controlled oscillation.
Sound on a tape echo is a classic sound. So it's like a looper, but a tape looper.
Exactly. You can layer sounds over and over, but every time the loop goes around, it passes through the virtual tape circuit again. So your loops will slowly degrade and saturate and take on the character of whatever tape age setting you're on.
That degradation is the whole point of tape looping.
It's essential for creating those evolving experimental textures.
But the really crazy advanced features are warp and twist. This is where the digital side of it really gets to show off.
These are for dramatic, on-the-fly sonic manipulation. Let's start with warp.
Okay, describe warp. When I press that button, what am I actually hearing? It's not just speeding up the delay, is it?
It's much more than that. It dynamically messes with the virtual tape speed to create these deep pitch bends and huge ambient swells. Think about the sound of someone physically putting their finger on the tape reel of an old machine to slow it down.
You get that big pitch dive.
Right. Warp gives you a perfect, controlled musical version of that effect. You can create these dreamy, stretched-out pitch shifts that are absolutely essential for cinematic textures and ambient music. It's like controlled tape destruction.
So it's using that physics modeling we talked about. The DSP knows that if the tape speed changes that fast, the pitch has to change with it.
Exactly. It makes the pitch shift a playable musical thing.
And twist, that sounds like the opposite, like pushing it into total runaway feedback.
It's pretty much that. It's synchronized, echo-mangling, self-oscillation. So you know how the intensity knob will slowly build up feedback? Twist just instantly throws the unit into this crazy controlled feedback loop that you can manipulate in real time.
Perfect for those sudden, intense sweeps and textures you hear in experimental music.
Yeah, for when you need a momentary explosion of echo chaos, but you don't want to lose complete control of your sound.
So for an ambient musician, these two features, warp and twist, are just massive. They let you create these huge swells and infinite trails.
It confirms this isn't just for classic sounds. It's a modern texture generator, a playable instrument.
So if we put all of this together, the modeled heads, the 3 tape ages, the preamp saturation, these performance controls, what's the overall tonal range of this thing?
It's huge. The spectrum is just massive. It goes all the way from these pristine, clear, stable tape repeats.
That would be the new tape setting with low saturation.
Right. All the way to those heavily modulated, warm, dark, worn-out repeats we were talking about.
Using the Warren setting with the wow and flutter cranked up.
And in between all of that, you can create these beautiful modulated analog textures and get that classic vintage tape compression from the preamp.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener?
It means the tone is just so much more detailed and nuanced than on older digital units, even the compact RE2. The complexity of how all these things interact, the head combinations, the tape physics, the preamp, it gets so much closer to that unpredictable but musical quality of a real vintage machine. The detail is in the imperfections.
Okay, let's get practical. Let's break down the different use cases from the sources, because the versatility is what makes it a flagship product. We have to start with the most obvious one. Classic tape echo.
This is the bread and butter. It absolutely nails those foundational sounds that define so much music. You know, the quick, tight slapback for rockabilly.
Yeah.
The big saturated repeats for surf music where that spring reverb is just as important. Those swirling modulated echoes for psychedelic rock and shoegaze. The gritty delay for blues.
And dub. You can't forget dub.
Oh, absolutely not.
Right.
The rhythmic saturation needed for classic dub, where the echo becomes part of the rhythm section, it just does all of that flawlessly.
Then you have the next category, which is more specialized. Rhythmic multi-head patterns.
Right. This is where you're really using those 14 head combinations, that U2 style syncopation, where the different heads create these interlocking rhythms that fill up space without getting in the way.
And post-rock, right.
Definitely.
Huh.
For those dense, atmospheric textures where the delays build and build over these long passages of music. And because it's true stereo, you can place those rhythmic patterns anywhere you want in the mix.
Then we get into the more modern sound design territory, ambient and cinematic use.
This is where those digital expansions really earn their keep. You combine a lot of wow and flutter with the worn tape setting to create these lush, slow-moving, warped pads for film scores.
And using warp and twist for those big dramatic effects.
Yeah, for the pitch bending, the infinite swells, the controlled feedback drops that you need for modern scoring, and the Hall and Plate reverbs give you the massive sense of space you need for that.
And what about for the sonic explorers? The people who use their pedals like their modular synths, experimental use.
For them, it's all about pushing the limits, using the hold mode for that degrading sound-on-sound looping, deliberately using the intensity and twist knobs to create evolving noise textures and rhythmic artifacts.
And just mangling the sound with the warp feature.
To create sounds that aren't even musical in a traditional sense. Sound effects, strange sonic events.
And finally, the ultimate pro environment, studio mixing.
This use case is what confirms its status as a full-on tape echo processor. Because it's true stereo, has the kill dry option, and that amazing preamp, it gets used on everything, not just guitar.
Like what?
Vocals, synths, drum machines, keyboards, bass. On vocals, the preamp adds warmth and weight before the echo even starts. For synths, the stereo field and analog color can bring a digital synth patch to life. It just enhances any signal you run through it. It's the modern pro-level tape echo workstation.
It really is like one machine that can do the work of a whole studio's worth of vintage gear, all perfectly packaged for today.
So to really put the RE202 in its proper place, we need to look at it in context, compare it to its own family, its own lineage, and also the competition.
Roland and VSS have tried this before, right? There was the RE20 back in 2007, and even a smaller, compact RE2 that came out the same year as this one. The sources say the RE202 is the undisputed king. What makes it so much better than its own siblings?
It really comes down to processing power and the depth of the feature set. The old RE20 was great for its time, but it was mono, had way less memory, and its DSP just couldn't handle the kind of simultaneous component-level modeling we've been talking about.
It was a good picture of the sound, but not a simulation of the machine.
A very good way to put it. Yeah. And the compact RE2 that's designed for a small pedal board, it's simpler. It doesn't have the dedicated tape age button or all 3 reverb types or the separate saturation and wow flutter knobs. The RE202 is the no-compromise full-featured supercomputer version. It models the physics,
So it beats out the older versions, and the sources say it also surpasses countless boutique clones and software plugins. And the reason is that depth of research. They had the original blueprints. They measured actual old machines.
Right. They didn't just guess what happens to the high frequencies on old tape. They measured the magnetic flux and frequency response of real, aging tape and built the digital model on that hard data. That deep dive into the mechanical reality is why it's the ultimate evolution of that legacy.
And you see that reflected in who's using it. Ambient guitarists, synth players, producers, film composers, live performers. The fact that it's being used by so many different high-end professionals really confirms its status as this versatile pro tool.
Which leads us to that very bold statement we found in the sources, and it's a contentious one. For many, the RE202 is the best tape echo ever made, period. Analog or digital.
That's a massive claim. I have to ask, the sources must address the counter-argument, right? That a digital unit, no matter how perfectly its model, can't truly replicate the organic, unpredictable failures of a real, aging analog machine.
That's a crucial question, and yes, they do anticipate it. Their answer is really interesting. It lies in the idea of selectable imperfections.
Okay.
The argument is that, yes, a vintage analog unit might fail in truly unpredictable ways, but the RE202 lets the musician choose and control the most musically desirable failures.
Ah, I see.
By giving you those 3 tape age models, new, aged, worn, it gets rid of the risk of your real analog machine actually breaking down in the middle of a gig while still giving you those perfect sonic flaws. The argument is that controlled, repeatable musical failure is better than uncontrollable, expensive failure. The RE202 has the soul, because the flaws were so meticulously studied and put under your control.
That completely reframes the debate. It's not about analog versus digital anymore. It's about utility and reliability versus pure, unpredictable vintage chaos.
Exactly. So let's just quickly recap the pros that justify its flagship status. It's the most accurate and flexible space echo ever. It has true stereo, that amazing tape age modeling, the new reverbs, the expressive warp and twist functions, full MIDI control for 127 presets.
And it has a low noise floor, unlike the original, and a superb build quality.
Plus that excellent dedicated preamp model. It's a long list.
But for anyone listening who's considering this, we have to talk about the user considerations, the potential downsides or trade-offs.
Of course. First and most obvious, its footprint. This is a big pedal.
It is.
It's way bigger than a standard compact pedal, and if you're trying to manage space on your pedal board, that is a major consideration. Second, the cost. It's a flagship, pro-level workstation, and it's priced like one. It's not for the casual user.
And finally, the very complexity that we've been celebrating this whole time can actually be a downside for some people.
It absolutely can. Yeah. All these multi-parameter controls might just overwhelm someone who just wants a simple slapback echo. To really get the most out of it, you need to understand a little bit about how tape works, what intensity does, what wow and flutter really is, how the head combinations interact.
It's not a plug-and-play pedal.
It demands some engagement, some study. I mean, it could be a simple slapback, but it's arguably overkill if that's all you need it for.
So that brings us to the final summary. The RE202 is Roland and Boss's definitive, modern, and expanded reimagining of the RE201. It takes the physics of the past, perfects it digitally, and then expands it with modern performance controls for today's musician. It is the Space Echo reborn.
And that achievement, that near-perfect modeling of analog physics, expanded digitally with tools like warp and twist, it raises a really important question for you, the listener, to think about.
Okay.
When a digital system can so faithfully reproduce and then let you control and expand upon all the best flaws and characteristics of vintage mechanical gear, the wow and flutter, the noise, the saturation, does that old distinction between analog soul and digital perfection even matter anymore for creativity?
Or has the modern ability to control and recall these musical flaws on demand actually made the digital tool the superior creative platform? That is a fascinating thought to end on, watching this technology not just copy, but maybe even enhance the most beloved gear in music history. Thank you for sharing your sources and for diving deep with us into the legendary world of the Roland RE202 Space Echo.